On behalf of the Skill Committee of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we would like to welcome you all for today's webinar, The Roadmap of the Skill Ecosystem. We have with us Ms. Swarnali Mukherjee, the Assistant Director of Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who shall be briefing you about the technical part of the entire webinar. I would now request Swarnali to take it forward, please.
Thank you, Shukonna. Good evening, everyone. For the ease of listening to the esteemed panelists, we have muted all participants except the speakers. We would request all of you to kindly keep your videos off for better connectivity. Also, if you wish to ask any questions to our esteemed panelists, kindly write your questions in the chat box with the speaker's name who you wish to ask the question to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Swarnali. The webinar will be moderated by Mr. Meghdut Roy Choudhury. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome and introduce Mr. Roy Choudhury amongst you all. Mr. Meghdut Roy Choudhury is an entrepreneur, public speaker, and change maker. He started his first company at the age of 19, a music recording studio by the name of Loper House Studios, which has till date produced more than 200 albums and artists from across the world. Meghdut has a master's in management with specialization in international business from HEC Paris, Stanford University, and Tel Aviv University. He is currently the director of global operations at Techno India Group, one of the largest educational group in India, and has become a driving new wave of experimental interdisciplinary learning for adults through the recently established Offbeat CCU. Mr. Meghdut Roy Choudhury is also the co-chairperson of the Skill Committee of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has received Eminent Young Entrepreneur Award at the Times Knowledge Icon 2018 in Kolkata. We are very much honored that Mr. Meghdut Roy Choudhury has kindly agreed to moderate our today's session. I would now request him to take the session forward. Thank you, Meghdut.
Thank you so much, Shukarna. Thank you, Swarnali. Thank you all for the wonderful introduction. Hello and welcome to our webinar today, dear participants who've joined in. As far as I can see, we have more than 100 people currently waiting and constantly getting notifications for more people joining in, which means that there is definitely a lot of interest in terms of making sure that we get to understand our skill ecosystem better, because a lot of people are from that particular sector. I would like to first begin by introducing you all to our guests today. So we have with us Mr. Prashant Sinha. He's a renowned skill industry specialist. Mr. Sinha has around 2 decades of professional experience with leading consulting professional services like service firms like PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, Accenture, and Ernst & Young. So basically all the top 4 companies. He has also worked in the field of skill development for over a decade. He's extensively worked with key central agencies like the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and the National Skill Development Corporation of India, which is the NSDC, in areas pertaining to policy, skill implementation, scheme implementation, monitoring and evaluation, etc. Over the last 4 years, he has contributed to program management units pertaining to ITIs, which are industrial training institutes, also known as vocational training institutes in India, and short-term skilling initiatives of more than 10 states. He has undertaken various research studies for governmental agencies and multilateral agencies like the UNICEF, World Bank, etc. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Mr. Sinha, and looking forward to having a wonderful conversation with you today. Moving on, we also have with us Mr. Surojit Kumar Bhakot. He's the HR head from Lexus Motors Limited, having more than 22 years of experience in operations management, business development, customer service, learning and development, people management, and in various industries like direct selling, FMCG, which is fast moving consumer goods, insurance, automobile industry primarily. And he has also worked for companies like Amway, Modicare, Max New York Life Insurance, Tupperware, and most recently as the group HR head for Lexus Motors Limited. Welcome to our webinar on the skill ecosystem, Mr. Bhakat. Looking forward to having a very enlightening discussion with you. And last but not the least, our very own Mr. Subrata Dutta, Subrata Da, as he's called amongst us. He's the managing director of the George Telegraph Group and is the driving force behind the growth and expansion of the George Telegraph Group, with proven record of strong leadership, practical management, and an analytical approach in exploring alternative avenues for accomplishing high end results. He currently is a member of various different institutions and agencies. So he's the director of the George Telegraph Training Institute, which was established in 1920. Which very interestingly, the George Telegraph Group celebrates 100 years this year, and it's a very interesting event for all of us in Bengal, because in Bengal we don't see entrepreneurs, we don't see industrialists who can talk about their legacy for an entire century. And I think this particular accomplishment, this achievement of George Telegraph Group will be spoken about for many decades and many centuries to come. So for Subrata and the entire team at George Telegraph Group, we're so proud of all of the things that you've achieved. He's also, for those of you who know him, he's also the Senior Vice President of the All India Football Federation, the Chairman of the Indian Football Association of West Bengal, he's part of the Cricket Association of Bengal, a member of the Finance Committee, in fact, trustee of the Future Hope India, General Secretary of the George Telegraph Sports Club, and most importantly, at least for the purposes of this particular webinar, he's a member of the Managing Committee of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and the chairperson of the Sports Development Committee and Skill Development Committee of Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industries. So with his chairmanship and with his approval, we're going to go on to the next part of the session, which is us talking about how we feel that the skill ecosystem in this post-COVID era is going to change, and what are the things that we can do to help on behalf of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industries, which of course happens to be the oldest chamber of commerce in the country, how we can help those part of various industries which deals with skilling, upskilling, reskilling, how we can move ahead. So with your permission, Subrata, we'd like to begin today's program.
Yes. Permission is there.
Great. So welcome everyone once again. I hope you have the next 45 minutes or so free. I will be your host for today. I will be moderating this session. My name is Migrant Labour, and I will firstly like to take you all through the program flow of today. So we've already finished the first introductory part, which is perfunctory for any program like this, especially with such eminent members of society and members of industry with us today. We'd start off talking about vocational training, and with Mr. Dotto, we'll move on to various questions with our other two speakers, Mr. Bhakat, Mr. Sinha. All three of our speakers today will be answering two questions each, following which we will be having a question and answer session with all of our participants towards the end of the session, followed by a vote of thanks from Mr. Dotto. I will be talking a little bit about the skill ecosystem as I see it, and I'll be hosting the rest of the session. It's my earnest request to all of the participants listening in today. We will not be able to take live questions because it's not very easy to do that in a webinar mode. We would request you to either write down your questions in the chat box on the right, or write down your questions in, if you see a Q&A box anywhere, you can write it down there as well. We almost have 150 people at the webinar right now, and with that, I'd like to begin today. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been going through a very bizarre time. All of us have been restricted to our homes, and the biggest problem with that, I don't feel, is the fact that we miss work or anything. I think the fact that we miss a daily way of life where we, as human beings, as social animals, we miss out on the touch and feel. We miss out on getting to be with our friends, our family, which is not restricted to our small families in our homes, but our larger families, the people that we work with. We are all missing that. And in that particular scope, we are also realizing a lot of things. Every single day when I wake up, one of the primary worries we have is I represent Techno India Group, and at Techno India Group, we currently have about 5,000 staff and faculty members. Now, one of the biggest worries that has been bothering us from the very beginning of this COVID crisis is that how do we make sure that the teaching learning process in our institutions, in our vocational training institutes, in our ITIs, in our schools, colleges, universities, how do they continue in the same way that we have always done in the past? And it's very difficult, ladies and gentlemen, because things have changed. The status quo has changed. All of the teaching learning processes have had to be reconfigured for an online delivery, and it's not easy, especially in a country like India, where accessibility of technology is not the same throughout. Just because we are privileged enough, we are fortunate enough to be living in a big city like Calcutta, a lot of people who are our stakeholders in our various institutions, including our teachers, faculty members, etc., they come from very small towns where accessibility of the networks are not the same, where, for example, the bandwidth of the internet is not the same. And also, most of these teachers or faculty who've been teaching for very many years, they have not been brought up in an environment where they've been taught to teach online, where they've been taught to teach over Skype or Zoom or any of these other faculties. So how do we reconfigure, how do we reskill our own workforce to be ready for tomorrow? And this is something that, of course, worries us, and this is something that we have to find a cure for at the end of the day, because none of us know how long this COVID crisis is going to last. And on various reports, we've seen a lot of people talking about various ways of dealing with the crisis. But one thing is for certain: the way that we do work, the way that we do skilling, the way that every industry functions need to change. And a few very important facets of learning have become very important for us in terms of understanding what the future of skills or the future of work are going to be. So, for example, if you look at creativity as a way of reaching out to a lot more people in out of the box thinking ideas, this is going to become a very important skill, very vital skill for the future. Skills like emotional intelligence, understanding your consumers, is going to become a very important skill. Critical thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, there was recently a study done by Stanford University, which did a study across the BRIC countries, that is, Brazil, Russia, China, and India. And very unfortunately, Indian students in Indian schools were said to be some of the lowest in terms of their critical thinking abilities, because our schools are not built in a way so that they can create students who have the necessary skills to go through life on a day-to-day basis. So the importance of critical thinking abilities are becoming more and more prevalent in the post-COVID era. The kind of digital transformation that we had been planning for the last 5, 7, 10 years has happened in overnight, basically over a couple of weeks. So we need to be being leaders of our own industries and being leaders of our own sectors. We need to make sure that we are prepared for a tomorrow where we are able to deal with this crisis and any other future crisis that comes our way. So without any further ado, I'd get into the Q&A and the interactive session of today's webinar. My first question will be to the chairperson of the Skill Committee, Mr. Subrata Dutta. Subrata, we've known each other for a while now, and I've known you as somebody who's worked with my father's generation and who's also now working with our generation in the skilling industry. And through your various vocational training institutes, you've changed so many lives. And you, as somebody who's a leader of that industry, how do you think the COVID crisis is going to change the status quo? And how do you think, particularly for the skill industry, how have you dealt with the crisis at George Telegraph? If you could please enlighten our viewers, our listeners today.
Thank you, Meghdut. It was really nice listening to you. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is keeping well. Uh, this pandemic has brought an unprecedented challenge for skill development. In fact, it has paralyzed the regular education and training. The biggest consequence of this COVID-19 outbreak is the transformation of the way we work. And I feel that skill development has not been not been spared from being infected by this COVID-19. And I'm going to prescribe steps for the skill development ecosystem to be cured of this deadly virus and function normally or accept the new normal and go ahead with the business as we used to earlier. I will not speak about George Telegraph only. I will speak generally on skill development institutes, and I will give stress on four important factors uh, of skill development which needs to be taken care by the institutes. The first one is the mobilization of students. Those who are attending this webinar and belong to skill development institutes, you know that at the back of your mind, you have been thinking all the time that how to mobilize students during this pandemic situation. Yes, it is a challenge which we have to overcome. Earlier, we used to heavily depend on print media, but we have of late not received desirable response from print media. So I think most of the skill development institutes have shifted to digital marketing. So digital media marketing is giving us the best results so far as mobilization of students is concerned. And it is also very cost effective. And apart from that, uh, say the electronic media or the out of home media, they will continue to act as the reminder medium, and the direct marketing that we used to adopt for mobilization of students, I think that would be difficult because of social distancing, and we exactly don't know how long this social distancing would continue and when would the uh, vaccine be available to us. So till then, we shall have to maintain social distancing and have to accept this new normal and new life. And I think very soon, even after COVID, we would experience a new life, a new kind of new world for us. So I think there's another way. There is, the of to acquire database of students, prospective students, and the counselors can counsel them over phone and convert them into admissions. The next point, the next important factor is training. Training has been offline, classroom training, because skill development needs a lot of practical training, and we have been, doing at least 70% of the training by practical methods, but hands-on training was given to the students. But now we have shifted to online training because practical training or hands-on training is no more possible. But I feel uh, after this pandemic situation, post-COVID, uh, we need to blend uh, online and offline training. And for online training, as Meghdud also was pointing out while he was speaking, that for online training, network is an issue. In places, the equipments are also an issue. So, but and apart from that, I feel that during online training, free flow of conversation and discussion is also difficult. So, though online training has to stay, but I think we should also have offline training in small batches. For example, in a classroom of 40 students, 50% can be trained while they're being trained online. The rest can be trained offline while they will be doing practical in small batches. So, so that would allow us to maintain social distancing. And apart from that, we should also have internal assessments through online examination. And when we reopen after this, when we are allowed to reopen, we should also look after the sanitization part and the health and hygiene of all the students, so that they are given proper precautions, and you know the transmission of the disease is totally restricted. We have to take care of that. And now I come to another important factor, resource. Those who are managing skill development institutes, they must be knowing that how important human resources. I call them human assets. They need to be motivated. They need to feel the ownership of the institute. And not only that, they should understand or need to understand that their personal success lies on the success of the institute. And so they have to put in extra efforts to see that the institute remains successful even post COVID. And for to maintain social distancing, we must adopt either shift working or working on rotational basis. So I think this is very important, and the entire manpower has to, as I said, be proactive, self-driven, and they should go all out to see that they are successful, because on their success lies the success of the institute as well. And the last important factor that I want to stress upon, it is, I feel it is the most important factor. It's the students' placement. Well, we all know that thousands of people are losing their jobs every day, and there has been massive pay cuts across the industries. Industries are shy about recruiting new people. So it's a big challenge that we need to overcome. But I'm sure with the right strategy, right planning, we would be able to overcome this challenge very well, because uh, all the skill development institutes must strengthen their industry institute partnerships. They should in fact sign more and more industry institute partnership deals with the agreements must include hands-on training or apprenticeship, internship, followed by recruitments. And so so this is one way of making placements for the students easy. And another thing is that the courses should be so designed that it meets the requirements of the industries, so that in fact uh, there can be courses totally designed for them, so that after the end of the course they recruit all the students, because they would know that these students are being specially prepared for them. And this is there's another thing which I feel, it's my personal opinion, that since the purchasing power of the entire community would be low uh, post COVID and during COVID also, people would really think twice before buying white goods. So they would be retaining their white goods, which means maintenance would be required. So maintenance of white goods would lead to recruitment of service technicians, service engineers by those companies, because they have to provide proper service to those white goods. So that's an opportunity for the Skill Development Institute, which all the institutes should avail. And another thing is that we are all getting to hear that there would be an exodus of Japanese and US industries from China to India. And I'm quite sure Indian government is preparing itself for that, to welcome those industries and give them facilities so that they can set it up. They would take, I'm sure, 2-3 years to start operation. By then, the students of the skill development institutes which would take admission now and let's say for this season, for this session, they would be ready by then for a job, and placement also for those students would become easy for the institutes. So the placement department, the corporate communication department, has to work very hard and reach out to all the industries across the length and breadth of the country and maybe abroad, and so that the placement of the students of skill development, uh, are given at ease, because they join the skill development institutes to establish themselves in their life, to have a good career. And I think that should be the mission, that should be the goal for all skill development institutes, to place the students, not to just train them and leave them on their own to fend for themselves, but to establish them in their life. So I'm quite sure that if these factors are taken care of properly, all the institutes post COVID-19 would also remain healthy, hale, and hearty. So, with these words, I will ask Meghdut to take forward the program.
Thank you so much, Subrata. I think there was a lot of very, very interesting points in there. And for those who are watching today, I think normally when you have sessions like this, I've always noticed that the number of people at a webinar, yeah, it peaks and then it starts decreasing. But when Subrata started speaking, it started increasing. So that goes on to show, I think, how much people were enjoying listening to your very fruitful words. Thank you so much. Let's move
I
on
was
to
talking about solutions, Meghdut.
exactly, and that's what we need right
I
now.
did not talk about the challenges much.
We don't need naysayers. We don't need pessimistic people. We need optimistic people like you and me who are going to lead the country in the future, keeping in mind that everybody is going through a tough time, but unless there is an injection of positivity, it will not move forward. So that's important.
I strongly believe, Meghdut, that where there is a will, there is a way.
Absolutely. We're going to make it happen. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions coming in as well. For everyone who's asking questions, please keep in mind that we are going to take all the questions towards the end of the session. But for now, we're going to move to our next question, which will be for Mr. Surajit Kumar Bhakot. As I've already mentioned, he is the HR head at Lexus Motors Limited, as he's a very important personality in the automobile space. We would like to know from him. Hi, how are you, Mr. Bhakot? Can you just say something so we can see if you're if your microphone's
Hi,
working
hi.
properly.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm there. Uh,
Perfect.
Unfortunately, I have become Mr. India today in this evening.
Well, I'm
Welcome,
sure
Mr.
your
Rahman.
words are going to be enough for everyone. But let's get on to the topic. Mr. Bhagat's camera has been misbehaving a little bit, I guess, but we'll try to make do with what we have. The question that I would love to ask you is, how do companies need to prepare themselves now to survive in the post-COVID world? And if you could maybe put a specific focus on what kind of trends that you see, what kind of future of employment that you see is going to happen in the industry, and especially focused on your industry, which is the automobile industry. How do you think this post-COVID world will look like? If you could enlighten us a little bit, that'd be great.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I wish good health to everyone. I hope everybody is doing well. This situation is really a very tough, unprecedented situation which we are facing right now across the globe. And yes, everybody has been affected. All industries everywhere across the globe has been affected. And yes, with passing time, we have been looking forward to, as Mr. Dotto said, we are now facing and experiencing the new normal. So that's the new normal. We need to live with this and start looking for new opportunities and ideas how to win in this situation as well. As far as the companies are concerned, I first and foremost, as an HR head, I want to say that the most important part in this current pandemic situation or any adverse situation is that we need
Could
to
you
have a
speak
very
out a bit louder, Mr. Bhagat? I think you're maybe a bit closer to the mic. Your voice suddenly dropped.
am I audible right now?
Yeah, better now. Better. Thank you.
Better, right. What I'm saying, in this unique and very difficult scenario, the most important part which an employee or an employer or an HR which in the middle plays is that a very robust, empathetic employee communication, which is very important at this need of hour, because everybody's in a dilemma. They don't know what is the future lies with them, what is going to happen with them. Yes, as Mr. Datta rightly said, that in this new normal situation, though we are being trying to adopt the new normal which is now set up in our everybody's life, but the scenario has not been good for everybody. As Mr. Datta also said, that yes, there have been a lot of job losses and salary cuts across the industry and globe, which is a very tough scenario. But instead of that, we need to create new opportunities, new way of dealing this situation. And with this, first of all, I would say a very empathetic employee communication at this need of ours is very important. And uh, for all companies, the preparation has already happened, because now companies are opening up, they are resuming work. So definitely by this time, all companies have made their, if not, they have made their well-defined SOP in place, which is the standard operating procedure of how to deal with this pandemic and also make employees more productive so that the companies run in the right place. Proper communication to all employees. Then comes the identification of the workforce, who need to come to office and who can work from home. We need to segregate the employee strength and their weaknesses, based on which how we can map the manpower as per the workforce allowance. With, I know many of the companies have opened up and they are now working with scanty limited workforce, because as per to maintain the social distancing part. So it is very important to identify the people, that which job functions, which are the SOPs, or which are the departments who can assist the rest of the team coordinate from working from home, and who are the people who actually need to be in the office to face the customers or do which is not avoidable. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Right. Next comes in ensuring a safe and sanitized workplace for employees. Next comes in that companies, if possible, very desirable, if the company can ensure some transportation facilities or pool cars to help employees to reach their offices on time, and actually to carry on or help the company sail through this tough time, right? Definitely not to forget about some basic norms which all companies should follow is that, and I would say that is now we are coming back a situation which is, I would say, in a term, back to the basics, right? We are starting from scratch in a new way, and yes, companies have starting up various points of checks, like when the employee's safety comes in, the self declaration, checking of the Arogya Setu app, thermal screening, sanitize. In fact, a very healthy and sanitized workplace. Next point comes in is a very fast track training of the staff in the critical sectors through online modules is also important, because with the changing scenarios, our way of working also needs to be changed. People need to be upskilled, reskilled to build up a futuristic workforce which is ready to take the challenges going ahead. Even focusing on the skills and activities which can be remotely done and going to be in the immediate demand in future would be the focus point. Not to forget about the technology interventions, and also some like colleges and schools. Like, I personally see my son is now attending online classes in Google classrooms, which is like kind of not sought for at so early age, but still people are learning new skills, and it is very, very interesting. People are doing it, learning new things and doing in the new way. Now, coming to the next question, which was asked to me about the trend of future employment, I would say three top things to be taken care of. Number one is the agility. The companies who would use the early insights, be more agile to realign their policies, their processes, and train the organization workforce to focus on the customer would win this situation, would be a win-win situation. Next, to be precise, embracing the digital world, and it's not about only technology adoption but about evolution of the business models, including products, processes, and services, because this is what is going to be the future as of now. And lastly, I would say the work from home culture is going to be the new agenda, and I would summarize that to be a very interesting point, which I could tell it as a stop, STOP. And for S, it stands for social distancing, where even if you're working from home, I would say that your heart is at the workplace, still working from home, maintaining the social distancing. And this alone can help and help to spread, stop the spread of virus and check on the health of every individual as well as the organization. Secondly, I would say the option of travel time. On an average, every working person, every employee travels about approx 2 hours from home to work and back. So he saves on that time, and the travel time is saved, saving the cost of time, energy, and money. The third is O, that is occupancy. That means in the companies where, in order to maintain the social distancing, it is very important, because as you know, in this current scenario, if we accommodate, even what I'm seeing from 8th of June, maybe there will be more number of people who would be allowed to participate in the offices or in the organizations. But still, I would suggest that social distancing norms should be maintained. Why? Because many of the offices would have fixed workstations. And in case we can work from home, plan accordingly, department wise, the occupancy of the office, existing office, could be well utilized, maintaining the social distancing and also helping the back end operations to work from home. And last but not the least, which is the P, stop P, is the pollution. Yes, by less people commuting daily through road or rail transport, we will definitely contribute to the environment to a great extent and lead to better health, environment, and saving crores on the healthcare as well, right? So that I want to say, and I would like to close with something that many of us have been put forward to stress, to learn new things, to communicate something new, teach, train. But throughout new mechanisms and new audience, as we are doing a live webinar right now, the first of its kind. But yes, in general terms, we can say that we managed, till now, we managed sufficiently well. Maybe the productivity is not the same as we desire to be, but times it comes with time and experience. And I see a very bright future coming up in days to come. People will understand the way of new normal working in this new culture, and open up a lot of opportunities in new sectors. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhagat. It was really interesting, I think, for all of those hearing you today. And I think the points that you mentioned, especially I like the way how you managed to put all of these things into an acronym, STOP. I think this can become a very interesting way to put on people's calendars and to make sure that we are following the necessary rules and regulations at a time like this, when nothing that we know, that everything that we knew to be sacrosanct and religious before, it does not exist anymore, and the whole way that we do work and we do business is changing faster than ever before. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhagat. We'll move on to the next
Thank you.
question, which is going to be for our third and final speaker for today, Mr. Prashant Sinha, who's a very renowned skill industry specialist and has worked with all the major audit groups and organizations like EY and Deloitte and PwC. So because he's worked very closely with, hi, Mr. Sinha, by the way, let me first check if your connection's okay and we can hear you properly. How are you doing?
Yeah, Meghdut, thank you. I hope I'm audible and you can hear me.
Perfectly audible, perfectly visible as well. So, Mr. Sinha, you've worked very closely with the governments before, and even in our last conversations, we've heard about all the work that you've done with the ITIs, with the skilling departments, and you've even in terms of policy making and schemes of the governments, you've been an integral part of that. You've also worked with NSDC before. So, my question to you, I wanted to ask you was, in terms of the new age workforce. There's the TVET Pact that we've heard about, and we feel that there's a huge requirement of industry resource cells. What do you have to say about that? And if you could also tell us a little bit about how you feel the role, what you feel the role of governments should be in order to help the skill ecosystem move past this crisis. If are there any new schemes? I was noticing on the chat box as well, a lot of people were asking about this. Are there any new schemes? Is there any push on innovation that you feel should be happening or is already happening? If you could elaborate more on that, it'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Sinha.
Thank you, Meghdut. Yes, I'll just take a minute to just cover the background on government's intervention in the skill development space. Typically, and I'm specifically talking about the short-term skilling, where we realize that there are some 3 million people. We can, through the academic systems, we can train 3 million people, but there are 10 to 12 million people coming in the labor force. So the only way was to do some rapid skilling and get them into the labor force and help them learn on the job. And that's how the short-term skilling started. Initially, the government intervened through a STAR scheme, which was a reward-based scheme. And it went through its own evolution. And then we went to an input-based model, which is typically known from center as PMKVY, where we are trying to, go through a common norms, go through NSQF trainings, and have milestones, input-based milestones, some payment on mobilization, some payment on assessments, and so on. So that's been the evolution of the government, intervention in this space in a very nutshell. Now, this is a unprecedented pandemic. About 13.5 crores, or you'll see different estimates, but to have something like 15 odd crores of jobs impacted, either in terms of salary cuts or job losses, is unimaginable. Nobody could have thought about it. And this has led to three primary things. It is leading to an employment structure changes. So some traditional sectors may lose jobs. Some the beneficiary sectors may gain it. For example, tourism, hospitality, the jobs would be slow to come in. But on the digital side, IT, those kind of jobs, maybe the employment structure will shift a bit. The job content will shift. So a lot of people, when the companies started new processes, for example, even onboarding of employees, like Subrata Dutta covered how training has changed. Even every function of a company has changed. And now the companies may be thinking, do they really need to invest in so much of real estate? Can they shave off a bit of real estate. So the job content of specific jobs may change going forward. And the third thing that will happen is the job roles themselves will change. So, there are a lot of new jobs that I'm seeing there. There is an infection audit. There is a lot of jobs related to sanitation. If you are following Gayatri Srinivasan for LaborNet, she's running a lot of LinkedIn-based discussion groups as to what are the new job roles that would be emerging because of Corona. So, nutshell, a lot of focus on digital emergence of gig economies. People would not like to travel, so there will be a local economy coming in. So all that and will and now I'll hazard a guess as to how this will happen. It's always risky to do some crystal grazing, but still I'll stick out my neck. The way I see it, in spite of all the we did a lot in skill development so far. The content curriculum got built, the sector skill councils got built, assessment systems came in. A lot of progress happened, but still the results are suboptimal. We have low placement rates, huge challenges on job retention. Now with COVID, the suboptimal results, along with constraints on government funding, will force them to change the game. What I visualize going forward is a new pact, a new partnership, where the government may move out from financing an input-based model to something, say, a viability gap funding. So the government may say, I'm only willing to do a viability gap. I'm not willing to pay you for a training program. Or maybe, they may try new variances of this, incentivize this model. For example, there was an idea very hotly debated in Maharashtra, where the secretary there wanted to implement a skill wallet. Now, the skill wallet was a digital system where you empower a candidate to pay a training partner and choose which training that person wants to attend, give him all the relevant information. And through that wallet, that person can start paying and government can reimburse. Digital money can be transferred in that wallet by the government and the student can pay. So even the government interventions, because of their resource challenge and because of the suboptimal results, they will experiment with all these new models, which can be viability gap, which can be something like skill wallet, which can be even skill bonds. Typically for the audience to say very simply, skill bond is when outcomes are achieved, some bank or government finances that outcome. So complicated, but those kind of products can come in. The second thing that I see is a student copay model coming in. And I would cite the Pan IIT model in Jharkhand, wherein Preja, they are successfully running a loan-based model. And I remember once I was talking to Loyal Textiles and I told them, why don't you pick students from government schemes? He said, no, I do it from Pan IIT. And the advantage I have is I cut 10 installments from their loan. So these guys stick back with me for at least 10 months. And by that time, they get into the rigor of the professional life. So a loan-based model for skilling is viable and has been demonstrated before. I see those coming in as well. The third biggest thing I'm seeing is the role of the industry. As I said, we have to be vocal for local. I mean, people are not going to travel, and probably they are not going to travel for a year at least. In that sense, I see the local chamber of commerce playing a huge role in rekindling the industry, in rekindling the skill ecosystem. The industry chambers are best placed to to keep pace with all the changes that are coming because of this unprecedented pandemic situation. And right now, their involvement, right from mobilization in content, curriculum, in assessments, in placements, that is not there per se. The industry primarily operates through sector skill council. That's like a 50,000 feet, which doesn't work from if we are going to go with local economies. So I see local, the industry chambers which have strength in their respective areas to get more actively involved with the government and set up industry resource centers. Those can be at the state capital, or it may even have versions across the districts. But these would be the primary channels on which industry can engage across the value chain of skill development. So, that would be probably be some of the new ways in which skilling would get structured. Also, a lot of focus on entrepreneurship. I firmly believe industry has to look at skills and entrepreneurship in an integrated manner. I'll give you an example. Uh, it is very important that the entrepreneurship is integrated in the value chain of the industry. Otherwise, it's difficult to make it sustainable on a mass basis. The example I'll cite is, if you look at the logistic companies, when they started off, they made their truck drivers into truck owners. Obviously, they had their business reasons to do it. They didn't want to manage the operations of trucks crossing various checkposts and all that. But in the process, they created numerous people who now own a fleet. And this is very sustainable because they are integrated in the operations of the logistic companies. So that is where, I see industry coming in, and especially industry chambers bringing projects to the government, which will say how industry can support these entrepreneurs, make it sustainable by integrating them into the value chain of their respective companies. The third place I see as a new pact is an apprenticeship-based training. If you have been following Manish Agarwal, he's been writing a lot on how there should be an education pathway on apprenticeship-based training. And I am a firm believer of what he's saying. He's talking about a role of industry, a role of training partner, role of skill university, everything institutionalized through an act or changes in the rules to get somebody to do a BWalk and do an apprenticeship training together. So I think that's one of the big changes that will come. The fourth point that I want to bring in is the certification of learning journeys. Now, one of the things we discussed is, okay, the job contents are going to change, the job roles are going to change. So there has to be a point of arrival and a point of departure. I have a skill A today, and that skill A is not sufficient to give me a job B. So I need to do training, X, Y, Z to get from skill A to job B. And that learning journey where you are at a point of arrival and you need to go to a point of departure, that is where the industry needs to play a huge role, because they are the best people to tell you that if you are holding such and such skill set, if you do these sports trainings, then you have a skill set that is acceptable to the employer who is standing at the back of such learning journeys and reskilling and upskilling efforts. So those are four major points. Obviously, there's a big current crisis on migrant labor. So talking about government and not talking about them makes little sense. So obviously, the first part I feel about migrant laborers is to get the data. We don't know what kind of skill sets are there. We don't know how many people are going to stay back. We don't know when they are going to go back. So any entrepreneurship or skill development program without a portal and an adequate survey is unlikely to be effective. And I see some green shoots, but I hope government will do a better job of addressing reskilling and upskilling for local employment for migrant laborers. Also, I want to touch upon the what I would say a new age workforce, which will be much more digital, much more based on coding. So far, the focus on government has been on the repair job. We look at the segment which is we call NEET, not in employment, education, and training. I think this will change, and government now needs to look at engineers, need to look at our academic graduates, and embed skill development across, right from schools where we can embed a do-it-yourself program to ITIs, polytechnic, short-term skilling, engineering colleges, science-based colleges. Everything needs to be looked at in an integrated way, and this subsequently needs to take form in terms of setting up COEs for Industry 4.0, whether it's integrated in engineering college or a separate COEs. And the last point I want to cover is incentivizing people for lifelong learning. This is there in Singapore. People will need to reskill themselves at a rapid pace. So one-time skilling is not enough. This could come in terms of vouchers. It can come in terms of tax breaks. But we need to incentivize our people to frequently reinvent themselves and give them suitable incentives to do it with a periodic frame of time. So I think that's what I had to say. I'll wind up with this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, for those very enlightening words. I think I like the approach that you took, which was a lot of examples, a lot of anecdotes that you laid out for people who want to know more about what's happening with the government and what kind of facilities are going to be available for them. Also, thanks for bringing up the migrant labor crisis as well and how this needs to be dealt with if the country needs to move forward following the COVID crisis as well. Now, my initial idea of today's webinar was to actually ask at least 2 questions to everybody. But I think there's a lot of things that we have to say at this point, and there haven't been any other similar webinars on skill development that has happened that have tried to lay out a map or a roadmap for the skill sectors and skill council in general. What we'll try to do now is, because we're almost approaching the end of the session, I'm going to start taking some of the questions. So if the speakers don't mind, rather than going into another set of questions again, which I had planned before, I'm going to straight away jump into the questions that our viewers have been asking. I think a lot of them are very curious about certain propositions. And starting with Mr. Dutta, Subrata, I think you had a question by Mr. Pulok Das. He wanted to know, sorry, yeah. So Mr. Pulok Das, he wanted to know what skill developments can you focus after COVID, keeping in mind the job focus or entrepreneurship at a local level. Now, fortunately, this is something that I was going to ask him anyway, about the need for personal development or self-development during a crisis like this, so that we can easily move past this period. Subrata, if you would like to weigh in about this question from Mr. Das. Says, what skill development do you focus on after COVID, keeping in mind the job focus and entrepreneurship at local level? So more micro entrepreneurship, grassroots level entrepreneurship. How do you think that can help? And if you can add a bit of a few words on personal development and skill development at this time as well, self-development. Sorry.
Thank you, Meghdut. You see, I think everybody here would be one with me that this pandemic would be a game changer for the skill development ecosystem. And we'll have to see things in new perspective. And so far as my self development is concerned, which you asked me, I have organized an online placement fair for all our students who are awaiting placement. And there were hundreds of placement by many companies. Okay. So this concept of online placement fair and its implementation was a learning process for me. So you can say it was my self-development. Okay. And another, the other question which Mr. Das has asked, you see, I always feel that the students of skill development must acquire multi-skills, or they should go for upskilling. Okay, this will really give them a command over the job market. They would be in demand, and if they want to become entrepreneurs, they can become entrepreneurs. There's no problem. But I feel, say, a student of electrical technician can also do solar power technology. Okay, there's a lot of scope in becoming a businessman, a small businessman, or to start solar power technology business in a small way and then make it grow. And apart from that, say, suppose a student of electronics and telecommunication engineering, okay, that student can also learn computer hardware engineering and advanced networking. So that will, if he becomes a freelancer, if he sets up his own unit, he can service computer hardware in different industries, because people would be using computers more. They would be in skill development also. There will be a blend of learning between classroom training and online training. So and the institutes have to do that judiciously, decide on the blend judiciously, depending on the context and the content. So all the students, I think they should not stick to just one skill. They should upgrade themselves. They should as well as go for multi-skilling, because who knows, in one of those skills he would be able to set up his own business and become a successful entrepreneur in the future. Like one who has done civil draftsmanship can also go for civil construction technology course. One who has done automobile engineering, like Mr. Bhagat is there from Lexus Motors. One who has done automobile engineering, if he also learns the air conditioning of a car, or the electronics and electrical portion of the car, he would be able to start his own company to service cars for on air conditioning and the electronics part or the electrical part of their car. I think there are huge opportunities if one really wants to establish oneself, whether it is in the job market or as an entrepreneur. I think there are no dearth of scope, and uh, it is if he really gives his best efforts and if he's really willing, I think success would be granted for him.
Great. Thank you so much, Subrata. Thank you for taking the audience question as well. A lot of people are asking about local level planning, and a lot of I don't think my video is all right. There it is. So a lot of people have been asking about that, and I'm glad you took it on micro level entrepreneurship as well. For all of those who are asking about what you can do as well, I mean, I wanted to talk about a particular scheme that I just got to know, which has been started by the NSDC. So as a lot of you might know that many skilled Indian workers, including cooks, drivers, factory workers, airline staff, have lost their jobs. They were working in the Gulf area, and they have lost their jobs, and they have come back to India. So what has happened recently is that the few of the Indian ministries have come together and joined hands with the NSDC, with the National Skill Development Corporation, to create a database of such skilled workers and to explore potential employment opportunities for them in India. So the scheme is called Swades. We've all seen that movie starring Shah Rukh Khan. I think till this day when we watch it, it really makes you feel proud of your country. And this scheme has very rightly been named Swades, which is Skilled Workers Arrival Database for Employment Support. I would request somebody from the Bengal Chamber team to please post the link that I just sent onto the chat box.
Yes, I'm just sending it across. Give me 1 minute, please.
Perfect, sure. So the link is going to get posted onto the chat box. It's a very user-friendly online form which is available in Hindi and English. Other languages support should be added soon. If you know somebody who has come back from the Gulf and is currently, or come back from any other country and is currently stuck without a job, feel free to refer them to this scheme. And this is one of the things that the government is doing along with the NSDC on a grassroots level to help, with the upskilling and with the process of repurposing people back into their jobs.
It's done. I've posted
great. Thank you very much. Thank you. We do not have a lot more time, but I think we can definitely take one or maximum two more questions. I will take this question. Let's see. Okay. So let me ask this question to Mr. Sinha. Mr. Sinha, there's been a question that's been asked. What do you think will be the government's policy towards skill development post-COVID? And how much of the GDP will the government spend on the skill industry? If you could please weigh in on that. I think a lot of people want to know.
It's a difficult question. The fact remains that in this union budget, skill was given only 3,000 crores, when education was given more than 90,000 crores. So, that is what I was focusing on. I don't see any buoyancy in government funding coming very soon. Obviously, most of the states have seen their revenues go wipe out. They are under pressure to support the economy. Everybody has taken losses and are under pressure. So I do not see government having too many resources. As it is, skill was not taking the bulk of the resources of the government. It was a very small component. And that may also shrink. And hence, I argued that government may experiment with new models instead of 100% of input-based funding. uh, what will probably happen is a lot more innovative and a industry, a partnership where the student also pays, the industry also contributes, as well as government also comes in with something. Uh, that is probably a likely scenario going forward. In any ways, if the short-term skilling ecosystem does not improve outcomes, the incentive of the government to fund this sector big time in the current shape and form is would be declining over time. So it is in interest of training providers and interest of government and all of us who are associated and want a skilled India to let new models emerge, and hopefully those carry better incentives and disincentives so that the outcomes are achieved. And as I said, the most critical factor on that would be how industry
Can't hear you, Mr. Sinha. You're not audible, Mr. Sinha.
is it better? Hello?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now I can hear you.
The last point I was making is, industry has a big role to make it work, to fix this system. And there are various models. In developed countries, there is also a model which is called reimbursable industry contribution. Now, that is not so voluntary system, and I don't think there's any appetite for a provision like reimbursable industry contribution system in COVID times in a country like India. So I won't like to even bring it up. But the point I wanted to make is you need to get the industry game in it. Else, if industry is not investing in terms of mobilization help, in terms of curriculum content, in terms of assessment gate standards, in terms of placements, and if they are not local mechanisms to connect the local industries with the local skilling system, then I see a problem with the long-term sustenance of government funding as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha. I think we might have time for one more question. Let me see another question that we can take. If somebody from the backend team can help me out with the questions from the chat box. Do we have, in fact, time for another question? We are at 5:45 almost. Otherwise, we'll probably move on. Okay, we do have a question. All right, so this question has been asked by Helena Sengupta. What would be the new HR policies and how does a manager keep a vigilance on the team members for timely project delivery? It's a question for Mr. Bhakat. Mr. Bhakat, if you could please weigh in on this. It's a question by Ms. Helena Sengupta. What would be the new HR policies and how does a manager keep a vigilance on the team members for timely project delivery? I think it's a very pertinent question because a lot of people are working from homes, and the way that HR departments used to function is, of course, changing. It's very hard to keep track of what people are doing, how productivity is working based on what are appraisals supposed to happen, etc. So if you could, with your experience, weigh in on that, Mr. Bhakat, waiting to hear from you.
Hey, thank you, Elena, for your lovely question. Very apt and very, very relevant as today's date. As I earlier said in my previous topic, it is very, very important that, with this changing times, changing scenario, we are all adapting to new normal. And we are moving from, work from office to work from home culture, which is definitely new to India. And definitely apart from the IT sectors, this is only the IT sector has been instrumental in this concept of work from home, not the other industries as well. So what is happening, it is really, really difficult in the current scenario from HR to actually monitor their time, because when a person is actually working from home, he's sorry to say, it's not, with due respect to everybody's work ethics and culture, but with the current scenario, it is very difficult to have an unattended or undisrupted attention towards work from 10 to 6 that way. It's very, very difficult. But yes, it's how the department manager manages the team and gives them projects to handle with a timelines, and timely having connects through like similar kind of webinars we are having. We can have WhatsApp video chats and calls and stuff to give deadlines, and even to the fact face-to-face discussions can happen over video chattings and calls like this, or Google. There are Google Chats, various apps available in the App Store. So this is how. But yes, we need to, as employees and employers or managers, need to be in sync with the company policy that yes, this is the new normal, and we are open to this way of working.
Perfect. Thank you very
Have I
much, Mr.
answered? Have I
Bhakkar.
answered the question?
Well, we'll have to probably go back into the chat. For me, it was great. I think you're. Maybe do you want to? There, Sengupta says
Right.
that's okay. I don't know if that is Helena Sengupta from TIU Civil Department, but it could be, because I don't know a lot of people who write Helena that way. If you're there, thanks for tuning in, Helena. And if anyone else is there from the Techno India Group family as well, hope you enjoyed today's session. There, that is Ms. Sengupta from Techno. All right, great. So it was, I think that brings us pretty much towards the end of today's session, even though we could not go into the second round of questions with all our speakers. But I believe that through all the questions that all of you lovely people in the audience have asked, we've managed to answer most of your queries. Even apart from that, you already know the names of all our speakers. Feel free to get in touch with them offline if you have some specific questions for them. On behalf of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industries, the Skill Development Committee, I would now like to request our chairperson, Mr. Subrata Dutta, to please give the vote of thanks so we can bring today's session to a close. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure moderating today's session, and look forward to the next session with all of you. Thank you.
Well, first of all,
Yes.
I thank the managing committee members of Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industries. I thank my colleagues of Skill Development Committee. My heart goes out to Meghdut Roy Chaudhary for moderating this program so well. Meghdut, you have done a wonderful job. I must congratulate you.
Thank you very much, brother. That means a lot.
I also express my gratitude to all the speakers for speaking so well. They have really contributed very positively for the success of this webinar. And at the same time, I also thank all those who have attended today's webinar. I think the whole webinar went on quite well, and it was a great learning for all of us. And I'm quite sure this webinar would come to use in our daily life, because we have really got very good inputs from different speakers. And though it's a fact that this COVID-19 has created a tremor in our daily lives, and here those who live in Bengal, we have also experienced the Amphoon, and that's for the first time. It was a terrible experience, and we are really going through difficult times. But as Meghdut pointed out, that we should all have positive attitude, that all of us together, we shall overcome. Thank you very much.